At the end of every interview that we have for teacher candidates, we will say, "What questions do you have for us?" And they will always ask, "Well, what kind of support can I expect?" And we will always say, "Well, don't worry, we'll give you a mentor." But it's not real mentorship. I mean, it's support with the difficult kid or the field trip form or the grade card, but it isn't coaching. That's where partners like EdConnective step in. They provide observation and feedback with practice. That's real coaching. Their mission is to ensure that every student thrives by facilitating exceptional educator growth. So whether it's science of reading, whether it's leadership development, whether you're trying to build the best recruitment and retention efforts, check out edconnective.com. Hello, Imperfect Leaders. When I first became a superintendent, I remember I learned about positive coaching. Now, positive coaching is this framework for winning kids with sport, and it's done by building relationships with children first and foremost. And the way I saw it, positive coaching emphasized the aspect of doing something together, doing it with children, and then learning how to be a team. It wasn't about winning at all costs, and I loved it. My guest today, she's going to talk about something that still makes her cringe a decade after it happened, and I can totally relate. One of my first acts as a superintendent was to gather all of the coaches from the 6 middle schools and the 4 high schools, and I told them we're going to be positive coaches, that we weren't going to want to win so badly that we were going to damage kids. I always tell leaders, you got to get a beat on the system before you go out and you make these pronouncements. I should have followed my own advice. I am certain that I insulted so many of the incredible adults who were already positive coaches. What I needed in that moment, heck, what I needed well before that moment, was a leadership coach. Today, my guest, Dr. Natalie Nichols, is going to talk about the value of a leadership coach. In her case, leveraging EdConnective to help leaders support literacy instruction in their schools. And then she'll tell us her cringe moment when she unilaterally chose to institute a dress code at her high school. Welcome to a great episode. I'm Peter Stiepelman, and this is An Imperfect Leader. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Natalie Nichols is my guest, and Dr. Nichols is the Senior Chief of Schools and Innovation in Round Rock, Texas. And with over 20 years of experience in education, Dr. Nichols spent a decade serving Round Rock ISD in 2 major leadership roles as an area superintendent and then principal of Round Rock High School, the district's largest campus. Dr. Nichols has been an associate and an assistant principal and an instructional specialist, and she has also supported public school districts across the nation through the use of educational technology. Natalie, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you, Peter. It's super awesome to be here.
Well, it is super awesome to have you. And it really is. It's so nice to meet you. And I'm just going to jump in with, I wrote this book called An Imperfect Leader. And in the book and in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's this dimension called leaders learning work. And that's really like the mind of an organization's work. And inside that dimension, there is a term called systems and design thinking. And so in preparing for our conversation today, I read about an initiative you started in 2021 that was to increase the number of kids taking advanced math classes. And I think you called it Creating Futures Without Boundaries, which I loved.
Yes.
And you did it. I mean, I read that you went from 33% of students in an advanced 6th grade math class to 75% with no extra allocation of funds or teachers. So I know that our listeners are very interested. Would you take a moment and just talk about some of the steps that you took?
So what I'm going to say first and foremost is this was an initiative with an initiative. By that, meaning that our ultimate goal was to really create, increase college readiness skills at the high school level. And then when we took a deep dive into our data, we realized that the thing holding our students back was the level of math that they were able to attain. So it started us down on this road as far as really looking and digging into, if we want our students to be able to attain higher levels of math, what does that look like? And then what specifically within our system was holding them back? What systems of access and opportunities? First and foremost, we realized that specifically the way then we structured opportunity was inequitable. So if you wanted to be in advanced math, you needed to score at a certain level. You needed to get a teacher recommendation. And then on top of that, you also needed to get a certain grade. And so it was a matter of no one knew these rules. No one knew where it started, just that this existed. And if I, as a parent, then I don't even know how to navigate the system, much less how am I going to understand and or have a relationship with a teacher in order to move me forward, for someone to even clue me in on what the rule is to move forward. So at a very system level, we had already set it up to where people would not be able to access this. Also within our district, in elementary school, the only students who had access to advanced math were students in our gifted and talented program. And so if then you had the opportunity to know how to get access to that test and test into the system, then you had access to advanced math. So what we were seeing is we had already built in a system and a structure where from the very lowest level, we can look at our students and dictate then who would have access to high levels of math and college readiness once they got to high school. It was a perfect trajectory all the way through. And we had created the perfect system for inequity.
So I'm looking at this. As you're talking, and of course this is an audio podcast, so you can't see, but I'm creating this stock flow map, right? A very systems thinking approach, because you want to increase your stock in terms of your career readiness. And in order to do that, you got to sort of go back down and look at the math readiness as a sort of a prerequisite to being college, career, or life ready. And then you started to look at, so what are the limitations in filling that math readiness stock, which is you had access and opportunity issues. You had an inequitable system that required prerequisites, that required recommendations, that required certain grades. And then you even took one more step and looked at elementary, who was even eligible to be a part of that system, in middle school or in high school. So, wow. So my question is, and I would add, in talking to a parent I remember in my own school district who said, Peter, there are all these prerequisites. And I was willing to have that conversation with the math teacher to say, I want my kid in that class, right? And then the math teacher said, well, we use a math calculator. It's a very specific calculator. It's very expensive. She says, I was wearing my sweats and I was looking a little rough, but here was this guy who'd already made a judgment about what I was capable of being able to provide for my daughter, and said it's expensive. So thinking, I don't think you can afford this class, or would say it's a really hard class and for which I'm supposed to take away, so you don't think my kid can do it, I better walk away. So this sort of explicit requirements, and then this sort of unconscious bias that is being articulated to a parent saying why I think your child shouldn't be in this class. So I'm curious, how did you dismantle it?
So first and foremost, there's this sense of when you make a change within the system, oftentimes we target one population. Either we PD our teachers to death, or we PD our administrators to death. And
I have to interrupt you for a second, only because my mother will write me and say, "Why? What are they PDing? What does that mean?" Professional development, right? Okay. I get these texts. What is this word? Why are you PDing people? Stop doing that. Sounds bad. Sounds hurtful.
Tell mom no more acronyms. I'm going to try my best.
Okay.
And so what we also realized is that all of our stakeholders had the ability to make this change. No one stakeholder could undo this. We had to, and so we specifically went and looked at who those stakeholders were. So we decided there were specific things we needed to do with our parents, with and for our parents, specific things with and for the students, specific things we had to do with teachers, counselors, and administrators. So not just what it is we wanted them to know, but also what we wanted them to do differently. What behavior did they need to change in the behavior, in the system? And so that was one of the other things that we saw when we went back and assessed ourselves. We realized we will typically give people information, and we think just because I give you information, you know what to do differently. Our why had to be powerful. And the why couldn't just speak to logic. we realized it really had to get to the heart of people and their purpose for doing this work in the first place. It had to be inspirational. Logic was not going to help us find a way out of this problem we had created for ourselves based on the structures we built.
Right. You couldn't just make a technical change. You also had to speak to their heart about the capabilities and abilities of our children.
Yes. Hence the term futures without boundaries.
So let me move on a little bit if I can. I typically ask that leadership question I asked you second, but today I asked it first because I really felt like it really seems that you apply systems thinking as an important leadership approach. And I read that in an effort to help children achieve in literacy, that you've considered the materials and the training that teachers need, right? Like, backward design, just like you did with career readiness. And so, if children are going to be confident and capable, then they have to be able to read and comprehend well. And if they're going to be able to be strong leaders, then they have to be taught by really well-trained teachers. Mm-hmm. Teachers, like athletes and musicians, they deserve great coaching. And so I read that you're having your teachers trained to become better reading teachers. And I wonder, would you tell us a little bit about how you're doing that?
So first and foremost, I am a secondary teacher by trade. Coming into this work, I did not realize this in regards to early literacy and science of reading. I did not understand that people held very strong beliefs and mindsets, and there were definite camps as far as what they believed in regards to reading. And so in kind of understanding that, there were literal tears when sometimes I spoke with groups of people. I really needed to take a step back and figure out then, again, how do I make a compelling argument as far as a why behind this? And then also, because of that blinder, even though by law, the state of Texas said that everyone had to be trained in science of reading, again, there was discrepancy between, I have been through the training, but what does that mean? I have to change in regards to my behavior. So essentially then the most important part of the work for me came into what exactly does it mean and what behaviors do I have to change instructionally? How do I define that? And then how do I build in a process? Not only do I have to tell you how that looks differently, but I had to say, what does that look differently as administrators train into the professional learning communities? How do we practice them on the skills? How do I, from a system level, change my curriculum to specifically align with that? Is my curriculum even explicit enough? Am I the cause of the teachers not being able to do the right things instructionally? How do I train my administrators differently to go in and to see instruction and to give feedback on the instruction? So all these different pieces in the system needed to change concurrently. Otherwise, the system couldn't be reinforced as far as science for reading. So, and then I also had to provide a safe space, because the change from the type of balanced literacy to science of reading was an emotional one for them. I had to allow them a safe space to make mistakes and to also to mourn the loss of what came before.
My background is elementary, so I understand the real grieving process of asking to take long-held beliefs and adjust practice. So I totally get it.
Yes.
I'm curious, it sounds like there, as creating that safe space, that space to be vulnerable, that space that creates psychological safety to be even open to the prospect of change. It sounds like you then moved towards a coaching model that allowed teachers to have a safe place and someone who wasn't necessarily in their building, right, to be able to work through and learn with someone. Who is your partner in this work?
Right. Specifically, my outside partner is Ed Connective. And specifically chose them because, number one, the level of expertise and skill, where they had people who were in the work and experts in the work and had offered that help to others. So in being able to kind of talk through it and figure out, talk to me about what you know, what you understand, how this relates to professional learning communities, how this relates to walkthroughs, what are the things that you look at? So we were able to suss out as a team, as a district team, that they had the level of expertise as far as looking at this systematically and all the different pieces that needed to come together in order for this movement to work, science of reading, and for that changing our behavior as a system to work. And all of those pieces is what we wanted them to help us with. But again, from a place where, because it was not the internal people taking them through that grieving process, there was more freedom then to get on the other side, while the district personnel then did specific other work with the principals.
And what are you seeing?
Number one, it's kind of like when you have a baby. Initially, you're there and you're in the pain, and it's like, what am I doing? I'm never going to do this again. And once it's over and you've birthed that miracle, all you can think to yourself is, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And that's where our principals are at. It's to the point that their anger, it is all forgotten. And they will come up to me and say, hey, Nat, do you see our scores? Look how much our kids are growing. I am so proud of our teachers. It's as if like this was no one else's idea but their own. They are so proud, and I don't care. I love how proud they are of themselves. I love the fact that one of the things that's been phenomenal, we share everyone's data with everyone else. And we're seeing something in the data where, regardless of the campus demographics, if I take away the names, you can't figure out which campus is which. Because some campuses, they're just outperforming others. So it's totally up to your skill in putting this process into place. And so what's happening then is, where before I had quote unquote high achieving campuses where they kind of rested on their laurels because they were higher than everyone else, so they didn't push. Now everyone is pushing differently because it's like, I can't have that campus beat me. Right. So it has totally changed the way people see themselves. They're going after it. I am so proud and delighted, and also proud with our partnership with Ed Connective as well. They've been quite lovely.
How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
Oh man, I will tell you, once upon a time, Peter, those would have been fighting words. I would not have been able to really process that and take that in. One of the things that I love about my journey in leadership is I'm in a much different place as far as being able to accept the places where, not just that I'm not perfect, but it's not necessarily my strength. What I tell the people that I serve is this: part of my job and part of your job is to be in and out of leadership and fellowship. For the things where I know that that is not my strength, I have to be okay, and you need to see me as an example as far as letting go and let someone else take the lead, and seeing as far as how I choose to follow them. And it's a big thing within my team, and we talk about that as a lot, as far as I am not just looking at your ability to lead, I am looking at your ability to follow, because the best teams will go in and out of fellowship all the time. And so for me then, that idea of being an imperfect leader, that idea of fellowship totally nullifies that for me. And I no longer have to be afraid of imperfection or afraid of a perceived weakness, because there's someone else in my team where you now have the responsibility to carry us, because that is our responsibility for each other.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of an imperfect leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest is Dr. Natalie Nichols, the Senior Chief of Schools and Innovation in Round Rock, Texas. Now, in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they've made, and then we discuss it. So, what happened?
So there's so many decisions. Now, I'm going to go way back. Not that there's not anything recent, but because this one was there was such a huge blow up. And I think at the time, not I think, I know at the time, I wasn't nuanced enough in my leadership to understand that how to be gracefully wrong and then change direction. I did not have that nuances yet. I came from the school of thought as far as to be just a little bit more, formal in dress as a principal. And so I expected then for my teachers to follow suit. And so I instituted a dress code for where I required my teachers to be a little bit more formal. Now, number one, this is high school. Number two, this is Texas. And in Texas, in general, we are a little bit more formal in dress. All right. And so for me, it was the reasoning of, hey, here's the way students will perceive you. I totally missed the idea of culturally why this was different. And I was not embedded, and even though I had been at this campus for a while, but really understanding the decision and thinking through it, or even consulting with anyone else. I unilaterally decided this is what's going to be best. Here is what we're going to do, and made this pronouncements. So needless to say, it was horrible.
So I'm going to ask you some questions, if that's all right,
Sure.
Because this is, as my mentor would say, a juicy topic. This is absolutely thinking about dress code. These when leaders make a decision that will impact the cultural field, right? Sort of
Yes.
how the climate of the building. So looking back, what was the first thing that got overlooked?
The first thing that got overlooked, and again, I think where I was in my leadership, I really didn't understand this nuance. I understood leadership from the viewpoint of being out in front. Whether it is I have to pull you to the next decision, to the next level of achievement, or push you there. I really didn't understand the idea of leading from the middle, which means from an understanding of who the people I'm leading, who they are and where they are in their journey, and using that as my starting point. All I understood is what I wanted, where I wanted to go, and figured I can get there in one step. I did not take who they were, their culture, the why behind it, the importance of it into consideration at all. It didn't even occur to me.
So important to note, particularly for new leaders or those who are aspiring and thinking about large-scale changes, even what seem to be small, can have profound ramifications. I'm thinking, what did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships were formed as a result of this?
What new relationships were formed? It's more so what new relationships were destroyed because of it. I lost trust. I lost the ability to be seen as a collaborator. So where my teachers and my administrators totally trusted me when it came to instruction, what I did is I fractured that trust as it related to just seeing them as human beings and understanding that I was going to be a leader that took their feelings and what they wanted and what was comfortable for them into consideration. So that human aspect, that humanness of it, I didn't show myself in that best light. And I didn't show that I had then the ability to connect with them on a very human level. And so while, I laugh about it now, dress code sounds very small, but it was huge I think it's almost a decade. I'm still scarred.
Well, I really appreciate that you're spending the time to talk to us about it, because it's really hard to be vulnerable, particularly since you and I have only just met, and to then sort of visit what was no doubt an incredibly difficult leadership decision and the aftermath. I imagine, as you were sort of joking to say, what relationships were formed? No, these were destroyed. What it sounds like you learned, though, was the importance of considering the affective piece, the human side of decision making, not just the technical piece, and why that may have been a good decision. And we're going to get to, in the end, what was something that was good that came out of it, because from everything we talked about in segment 1, it sounds like you learned a lot from that decision that seemed to inform future decisions. But before we get there, what do you think you could have done differently?
Number one, I think it was a matter of even talking to them about my why. It is quite possible and highly probable that they would have gotten to that decision themselves if I had simply told them, hey, here's what I'm seeing. And there seems not to be too much of a difference between the students and ourselves. And we need to establish a higher level of professionalism and formality within that things are getting lost. I think if I had just simply come to them and talked them through what I was seeing, how I felt, it would be a matter of they would have offered up that solution. And then I would have had members of the school who had a lot of power with their other teachers probably come forward and say, hey, here's the direction I think we need to go. And so I would not have to push and pull. I didn't yet have the ability to understand how to allow people to come to an understanding, how to give a strong why. And so those are all things, nuances I think I developed within my leadership journey that was kind of missing at that time.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you think about if you're able to demonstrate through your modeling as well as communicating your mental model, right? Your beliefs, your principles, your values, and that begins to seep into the patterns of behavior that you'll see in your building, and then can result in different events or actions that individuals will take as part of a coalition, as opposed to just one leader going forward and doing it on their own. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, my last question is always, in the end, what was something that was good that came out of the experience? And I would just say, based on how you described the increased representation and accessibility to higher level math courses so that children would absolutely be more likely to be career, college, and life ready, the way that you have approached the training of teachers and the coaching of teachers around the science of reading so that they can become better trained, so that they can provide for the children in their care, really seems to suggest that you do this now in a very different approach than how you handled the dress code. Am I reading it right? Is that how sort of
you're reading it right? I will tell you where I am right now. It's a very succinct understanding. What I understand now is that everything is a lesson plan. And because every lesson plan has an objective, there's a content objective, but there's also an effective objective. And so whenever now I plan for something, I plan for not just content, but for emotion. I figure out first where they're at, where do I need to move them to, and I think through what's the right strategy for where my team, where they are emotionally, in order to get them to the behavior that is needed for student success. So it's something I teach into even with the leaders right under me that I serve.
My guest today was Dr. Natalie Nichols, Senior Chief of Schools and Innovation in Round Rock, Texas. And Natalie, thank you. Or can I call you Nat? Are we friends now? Can I say Nat?
Absolutely.
Oh, thank God. I thought maybe you were going to say no. Stick with Dr. Nichols. But thank you so much for describing how you've created pathways for students to succeed in both math and reading, and specifically with reading, how you've leveraged a partner like Ed Connective to give teachers the very best chance of mastering the art, the craft, the science of teaching, and then overall really helping to create futures without boundaries. I really am grateful for your time, your love for what you do, and I hope we cross paths again.
Absolutely.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print-inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader, and I'm proud to be an imperfect leader. I'm Peter Stiepelman. Please join me next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, Leadership in After Action. Imperfect leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? It's kind of a silly question because I know you are. MPAT Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with MPAT Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. MPAT Speech, EMPAT Speech.com. Empowering students, empowering schools.